On a July morning in 1994, Marcus Webb stood in front of an oak stump and felt his career slipping away. 2 weeks earlier, this had seemed like such a simple problem. The 300-year-old oak tree that had stood in the middle of his development was gone, cut down, hauled away, turned into lumber that would probably end up in some rich person's custom furniture. All that remained was the stump. But what a stump it was. The trunk had been 8 feet across at the base. The root system spread 40 feet in every direction, thick as telephone poles near the center, branching and rebranching into thousands of smaller roots that gripped the Missouri clay like fingers wrapped around a fist. This tree had been growing since before the American Revolution. Its roots had had 3 centuries to dig themselves into the earth. Marcus had figured his new excavator would handle it in an afternoon. He'd been wrong. Let me tell you about Marcus Webb, because you need to understand the man before you can understand why what happened next mattered so much. Marcus was 42 years old and had been building things in central Missouri for 20 years. He'd started as a framing carpenter, worked his way up to site foreman, and eventually started his own company. Webb Development was now the biggest residential contractor in Callaway County. Luxury subdivisions, custom homes, the kind of projects that made other builders jealous. Marcus had a gift for marketing. He drove a white Mercedes convertible with Webb Development painted on the doors. He wore designer clothes to job sites. He brought clients out to watch his equipment work, made a show of the massive machines moving earth, the raw power of modern construction. He called himself the builder who gets it done. His competitors called him the showman. The Deer Creek Estates project was supposed to be his masterpiece. 50 luxury homes on 5-acre lots, starting at $500,000. A gated community with its own private lake, tennis courts, a clubhouse. The kind of development that would make Marcus Webb a name people remembered. The entrance road was critical. It curved gracefully through a stand of mature trees, creating exactly the impression Marcus wanted. Money, prestige, nature tamed but present. The design called for the road to pass within feet of where the old oak had stood. The tree itself had been easy enough to remove. A professional crew, specialized equipment, 2 days of work. But the stump remained right in the path of where the road needed to go. "We'll pull it out this weekend," Marcus had told his crew. "I'll bring the new cat. Should take maybe an hour." That had been 2 weeks ago. Now Marcus stood in front of that stump with hydraulic fluid on his shoes, 3 burst hoses in a pile behind him, and absolutely no idea what to do next. Let me tell you about the first attempt, because that's when Marcus should have realized he was in trouble. The Caterpillar 350 excavator was Marcus's pride and joy. He'd bought it 6 months earlier, $400,000, financed over 7 years, 40 tons of yellow steel and hydraulic power, a machine that could dig a swimming pool in a day, move a mountain in a week. Marcus had driven the excavator himself for this job. He wanted to show his crew how it was done, wanted to demonstrate the raw capability of modern equipment against this ancient obstacle. He'd positioned the machine on solid ground, extended the boom, wrapped the bucket around the base of the stump. Then he'd engaged the hydraulics. The excavator groaned. The tracks dug into the dirt. The engine screamed. The stump didn't move. Marcus had pushed harder. The hydraulic lines began to whine, the pressure building beyond their rated capacity. He should have backed off. Any experienced operator would have. But Marcus wasn't an experienced operator. He was a salesman who knew how to drive heavy equipment badly. The first hose blew at 3:47 in the afternoon. The sound was like a gunshot. Hydraulic fluid sprayed across the machine, across the stump, across Marcus's designer jeans. The excavator's arm went limp, dropping the bucket uselessly against the stump. "Get the spare hoses," Marcus had ordered, his face red with embarrassment. "We'll fix it and try again." They'd fixed it. They'd tried again. A second hose blew. They'd fixed that one too, brought in a bulldozer to push while the excavator pulled. The bulldozer's tracks had spun uselessly on the clay soil while the excavator strained against its limits. A third hose blew. Now it was 2 weeks later. Marcus had spent $30,000 in repairs and delays, and the stump sat exactly where it had always been, immovable, ancient, mocking. Let me tell you about what happened on that July morning, because that's when Chester Holloway appeared. Marcus was standing with his site foreman, a man named Dean Curtis, trying to figure out their options. None of them were good. We could blast it, Dean suggested. Dynamite. Too close to the property line. The county would never permit it. What about chemicals? That stuff that dissolves stumps. Takes 6 months. We don't have 6 months. The buyers for the first phase are closing in October. If that road isn't in by September, we're in breach of contract. Then we dig around it. Manual labor. Chainsaws for the roots. Marcus shook his head. I got a quote. 40 men, 3 weeks, $250,000. And even then, they said they might not be able to move the center mass. That stump goes down at least 15 feet. They stood in silence, looking at the stump like it was an enemy fortress they couldn't breach. That's when the old Caterpillar crawler came clanking up the access road. Let me tell you about Chester Holloway, because you need to understand him to understand why this story matters. Chester was 71 years old and had farmed 320 acres on the edge of the development for 45 years. He'd watched the bulldozers arrive 6 months ago, watched them clear the land that had been his neighbor's farm for generations. He'd kept his mouth shut when the construction traffic tore up the county road. The county road. He'd said nothing when the dust from the grading work settled on his crops. Chester Holloway wasn't a complainer. He was a watcher. And for 2 weeks, he'd been watching Marcus Webb throw expensive equipment at an oak stump and lose. Chester had grown up pulling stumps, not with excavators. There were no excavators when Chester was young. Not with hydraulics. Hydraulics were for people with money. Chester had grown up with chains and pulleys and the patient application of physics. His father, Emmett Holloway, had bought the Caterpillar 20 crawler tractor in 1932 during the worst of the Depression. Emmett had paid $800 for it, used, already 2 years old, and it had been the most expensive purchase of his life. But Emmett had seen what that little crawler could do, and he'd known it would pay for itself. The Caterpillar 20 weighed about 5,000 pounds and made maybe 25 horsepower. Compared to Marcus Webb's excavator, it was a toy. But the 20 had been designed for one purpose: pulling. Pulling plows through heavy soil. Pulling stumps out of fields being cleared for crops. Pulling loads that horses couldn't move and men couldn't budge. Chester had watched his father use that crawler for 20 years. He'd taken over the machine when Emmett died in 1967.